Okay, so Fraser, thank you so much for joining. This is the Scamurai podcast. We're coming to you from Tottenham. I fucked it up already, and now I've sworn. Fuck. Shit. Okay. So, instead of being in Hong Kong this week, we are in Tottenham Court Road. There, I said it right. Yep. In the far too hot London. And I know, coming from Hong Kong, I should not be complaining about that, but I am. Fraser, who are you?
Yeah, thanks for having me first. So I'm Fraser Edwards. I'm CEO at cheqd, one of the co-founders. We've been focusing on and building decentralised ID, self-sovereign ID tech for about 4 years now, with a real focus again on like privacy, data ownership, confidentiality, all that kind of stuff. Looking forward to kind of diving into this, and it's a bit of a hot topic.
Yeah. Have you kind of, since this has been implemented, run into anything that's asked you for ID or verification?
I don't think so.
Yeah, me neither.
No, although to be honest, it's not like I've been up too much recently, like online. So I've not gone down any of like a weird rabbit hole or anything. And nothing else I've used. I guess everything else that I'm using as an existing service, like I don't know, Instagram, so other social networks, that kind of stuff. Like I'm already registered in there with a date of birth, and probably for a reasonable number. Like they do have some level of ID for me, especially like the stuff I use on a regular basis, like banking, that kind of stuff. Like, yeah, so I don't think it's changed anything. I've been necessarily, yeah. But the short answer to what your question is no. I haven't actually been hit by it yet.
Yeah, me neither. I mean, I'm just kind of like trying to put it in context for people outside the UK. It's not like we go on like Google and they demand our passports.
Yeah.
Which I think some kind of reports have sort of made it out to be.
Interesting.
It's like everything you go on. I mean, the only thing I ever kind of get stopped on is if I go on Reddit and they brand something as like not suitable for work, and you have to like sign in.
Yeah.
But it's also I just can't be bothered to sign in. I don't care enough. I shouldn't be doom scrolling. So
yeah.
You know.
And that, I think maybe that's, I don't know if that's necessarily part of the backlash, but there is probably a little bit from those services where they're like, this is friction, we hate friction, and therefore it means that I'm gonna, like, I've had the same thing with Reddit where I'm like, well, I wasn't that interested now, I'm just gonna bail. Like, I don't want to sign in, and therefore I'm just gonna leave. Like, it wasn't worth that hassle of going through, and I think that's probably gonna happen like a lot on these, just within the UK, like the friction will just go up.
Yeah. You talked about like obviously the way people circumvent this is just to use a VPN.
Yeah.
You know, I've always kind of been curious because I think a lot of like I pay for a VPN. I have like Nord or Astral or something.
Yeah.
But like I've noticed, including like when I was living in China, there's a lot of free VPNs online. Should people be worried about using them? Like, what is going on there?
Yeah, don't do it. So I don't think most people are aware that like really what is happening is you're effectively creating a tunnel from your device to wherever the exit of the VPN is. So it's encrypted traffic between like wherever you and the exit is, and you're effectively just moving wherever that exit is to wherever you want. So like if you're using NordVPN, you're just picking out of a list of servers and countries and be like, right, I want my traffic to emerge here. Largely for like people are avoiding geofencing on content. That's which is basically exactly what's happening here. And that's largely what a lot of people are doing, whether it's for Netflix or other services, is just to move that around. But I don't think what people are very aware of is wherever that server is, like they have the ability to see the traffic that you're generating, and depending on what you're putting through that and how secure it is, like there is the ability for them to see kind of what you're accessing and all this kind of stuff. Like it goes back to, it's that classic statement of like, if you're not paying for something, you are the product. And with VPNs, like if it's for free, either it's to monitor what you're up to and get some kind of insight, or a lot of them are like hidden viruses. That was like my experience back when I was a teenager. Like you'd go to install one of these things and just be like, okay, I'm just gonna see what it's like, and you'd immediately get like flashing warning lights off your antivirus that's like, don't touch this with a barge pole.
So then you disable the antivirus and just go ahead.
No, thankfully I was a bit more sensible than that. But yeah, then it was, or we'd be just using them at school to like get around like the controls on the basic devices in school. And yeah, so at school you try and get away with it, but at home I was like, I don't trust this enough. So yeah, I wouldn't, unless it comes highly recommended by someone independent who's done some kind of like security research on it, largely wouldn't be touching anything that's free.
And I guess like even if they're paid, they're not like foolproof, right? I mean, I remember like when I used paid VPNs and I lived in mainland China, for some reason every VPN would stop working at the same time each year during these political conferences called the Two Sessions. And I think the implication was if the Chinese government really did want to stop it, they could, you know, but they just kind of allowed it anyway, you know.
Yeah, well, I think one area is a lot of the IP addresses of VPN servers are known. Like they come within certain batches, or like it's kind of like it's open enough that people start to compile these lists and blah blah. So it is possible to just completely like block it off. So yeah, I think there's like layers of, you could go from like VPN down to like Onion and Tor, like all the way down into like I think NIM does a mixnet, that kind of stuff. But yeah, there's variations on it, but it is a kind of like if someone really they control all the infrastructure of the internet, then there's not much you can do ultimately. Like up to a point, there is, especially I'd say inside like maybe China or Iran, like if they decide it's all stopping, like they pretty much got, to my understanding, the power to do so.
And I suppose if you don't want to go down the VPN route, you can just, like a lot of people, make a fake ID now. And there's been kind of reports to get around this sort of these restrictions in the UK of, I think it was like making ID cards with MPs or something like that. Do you want to talk a bit about it?
I love malicious compliance. That's excellent. I think that's obviously a little bit outside of this discussion, but like fraudulent IDs or just fraudulent documents in general are going to become more and more of a thing. I was in a session last year, around this time actually, and I think someone said that to get a very realistic, like, as if you'd taken a picture of a passport, but it had a completely like all the details on it were generated by AI, was $20, I think, at the time. And that was last year, which means the price has inevitably come down. And so you're rapidly heading into this point where probably generating the documents will be cheaper than the actual having to check the documents itself. So then you're going to just be overwhelmed by spam. I think with regards to these, like, so companies probably like Pornhub and the like, where they now have to comply, but they have to like do that check and take some kind of ID. Like, again, it's costing them money to do that every single time, and for them, they don't necessarily want to be doing it because it's a cost and it's friction. So there is an element of like they'll attempt to go for the bare minimum because it's better for their top line basically, and eliminates or reduces the burden on the bottom line as well. So it's really complicated, really complicated. But I think with the advent of generative AI, I think that's going to be one of the biggest catalysts for this move towards credentials and self-sovereign ID, because just having the data like without any context of where it came from is going to start becoming useless. And I think that's one of the things we were discussing before. I think with the Paragon guys as well. Like, if you don't know where that data came from, like, and I think there's an example where someone created a website to capture this data from people, like as basically as like a fraudulent kind of ID checking website that would then get you access to kind of porn and other like adult services, and it was just taking the data and then using that to kind of try and get into other services, which I think is terrifying. But it's because none of that infrastructure is set up around like, where did the data come from? Is it the correct data? Was it signed? All this kind of stuff. So,
if I was the sort of person that watched porn, which I'm not, okay, but I wouldn't really want to give my passport to Pornhub. I wouldn't trust them, you know? You know, it's bad enough that there's like a hack every like, I was going to say every few weeks, it's probably like every minute at this rate, but
yeah,
you know.
I can't remember who the latest one was, but again, it was like loads of documents were released. Was it the Co-op? I think the Co-op.
Marks and Spencers, I think.
Oh, okay. So it was them, and I think the Co-op Bank was a recent one. Or it was either Co-op or Nationwide, but it was one of the two. And again, like that is then highly sensitive information. So I think handing your data over to that type of company is just in general, it's just a bad idea now. people have to do it for compliance reasons, but I think the hope now is that we're going to move away from just having that data to did it come from the right person in the first place, and I think the infrastructure for all of that is coming. We're just in this weird period where the legislation's coming in, it's mandating all these checks, and actually the potential infrastructure to come, like the technology itself is already there, but the infrastructure and solutions around it haven't yet been implemented to go make it clean and private. So we're in this like maybe 12-month, 18-month gap, I would hope, where we're in this weird hinterland that in a very, and again this all assumes that it's going to get built in the right way and privacy preserving, all this kind of stuff, but if it is, then it's a much better solution than what we have now.
Yeah, and I guess kind of, for just additional context, like in the UK, we don't give out like our IDs for that much. Like there isn't a national ID.
Yeah.
I had a friend come here from China, and she was just like, wait, I don't need to show my passport to take the train. Because in China, if you leave your city and you buy a train ticket or a bus ticket, you have to show your ID card.
Yeah.
If you want to use left luggage at a train station, you have to put in your ID card. If you want to go into a museum, it's really, really everything is like, which is terrible when you have a passport instead of an ID card, and they have to find a different form on the computer, and like people don't even know how to do it.
That, and it means you're carrying your passport around all the time when you really don't want to be.
Well, in some countries it's like a legal requirement. Yeah. It was so hard for me to get used to because I'm just like, are you insane?
Yeah.
In the UK we don't.
No.
Like you might have to show some ID if you go to a bank, I guess. Like.
Oh yeah. So I think like banks, telcos, crypto exchanges. Which I think I've had a few recent. Oh no, maybe not. No, those are the main ones for me. It's almost always like bank accounts, any other exchange accounts, renting cars, obviously, and phones, anything to do with that. But once you're past that, it goes down. And travel is the obvious one. But once you're outside of that kind of 4 or 5, and nightclubs, like events,
oh yeah, for drinking.
Yeah,
exactly. That's something you don't need to do in China. Like you could, you can be like 10 and probably go and buy a beer and nobody would care. Like. Yeah.
But that's probably the most frequent time I'm using my ID at the moment is going out.
Are you still getting ID'd at the club?
It's more. No, that's good. It's more. I think it actually. I know exactly what it is. It's that they're more using it to identify people on ban lists than it is for age now. So I think there's an element of age for like if you're looking like underage.
Are you on any banned lists?
Not that I'm aware of. I really hope not. And to clarify, not that I've done anything ever that would get me on one. But yeah, I think they're using it a lot more to be like, certainly in London, I think that, again, I'm speculating, but from the systems that I've seen, I assume there is like a shared watch list between all of the places, like the bigger venues in London that are like, this person was banned from X, therefore they're not allowed anywhere else now. So that's probably the thing I'm using it most frequently for at the moment. But yeah, to your point, not for like getting on a train or anything like that at all.
Which is insane, because like the one time you really need ID is when you're getting pissed, and it's just like that's the one time you shouldn't be carrying ID because you're most likely to lose it,
Yeah, having done that when I was 18.
Okay, so solutions.
Yeah, so I think at the start of this year, and I think the technology that's underpinning it is still kind of in the process of being worked through. But in the UK, there was all this noise around kind of having a digital driving license and a government ID in an app. And both in UK and Europe, there's a move towards verifiable credentials for this kind of data, for whether it's IDs or anything else. But the principle there is that you are certainly the controller, if not ideally the owner of that data. So it sits on your device. Yes, it was issued by the government. They're going to have a copy of what they issued you, but you have the sovereign kind of, I guess, the gold standard record, the kind of the truth. Yeah. On your device or somewhere that you can access it, and then you can share it. And so why that's important is, let's go back to your example of the kind of deepfakes or generated documents. Like in that scenario, you're no longer sending a picture of a document that you have that can easily be defrauded. you're sending a data packet which has your signature on it, and it has the signature of the government that issued it in the first place. So when you send it to someone else, they can check both of those and all the data and say, okay, I know it came from you because it's on a direct channel with you, and I know that it came from the government because they've issued it to you. And then potentially you can even do some additional stuff where you do biometrics between who is sharing the credential and who is on the credential. So proof that at the time that I shared it, for example, to you, let's say it's a driving license or a passport. The point where I share the passport to you, I was in control of the phone. So there's a biometric check between the passport and me before I sent it to you. So I can't just like palm my phone off to someone even with the ID and be like, okay, that's now yours, you can go use it. There's still the potential to do that check if you want to. Depending on the use case and what, like, how secure you want it to be, it's possible. But the nice thing there again is like you get rid of this fraud vector where you could just generate pictures of documents and submit them and do it that way. But the other really cool thing that it does, so actually just to double down on that point as well, it also means that let's say your your ID details were in one of the recent hacks. So someone knows your passport number or your driving license number. They know pretty much all your details. Moving to this system where the recipient of the data needs to know where it came from and who issued it originally, gets rid of this kind of vector of people just taking data that they found on the dark web and then using it to access your account, because even if they have the data, they don't have the right copy of the data that's signed, that's valid, that's non-revoked, and came from the right place. And the other nice thing about this technology is because it's fully digital, you can start doing really smart stuff. Like there's two concepts which are often conflated together, but actually are distinct. So one is selective disclosure. So that's the ability for me to take my digital ID, go to a bar, and prove my date of birth without sharing anything else. Probably because it's relevant, my picture, because otherwise you could just get away with anything. But I can, instead of my driving license that has my home address, it tells you what cars I can drive, maybe if I've got any points on there, a bunch of other stuff. I can literally just take my picture and my date of birth and share only those attributes to you. And so you immediately know that those attributes are trustworthy, and you can match the face to me and you can match the date of birth against whatever age I should be, and then provide that service. You don't need to know anything about what my name is, where I live, anything. And to use a similar example in the OSA context, that would be I can prove my date of birth without anything else. You don't even need to know my picture, my name, anything. I'm literally providing you a date of birth that I can prove, and that's enough to immediately allow access. And because it's digital as well, you could do it on the fly without necessarily needing to keep kind of deep records, because you can prove every single time what you went through and what that process is. So that's selective disclosure, which is like a bunch of attributes, you select whichever ones you need and select those. There's also the ability to do zero knowledge proofs, and that's moving from I've shared my date of birth to I can prove I'm over the age of 18 without sharing my date of birth. So I can now share a proof to you that you can independently check. Again, you know exactly where all the data is from and all that kind of stuff, but you have no, you don't even know my date of birth. So we've moved to like almost complete privacy, whilst the ability to prove compliance with a given kind of standard. And this is kind of the tech that is in the process of being implemented, I think, in the UK as well as Europe. And once we're at that stage, we're at the point where like that compliance is very, very easy to prove in a privacy preserving way, with one caveat, which has kind of happened or been discovered in the US, which is there are different kind of formats that these credentials or data is being moved around in. So you've got verifiable credentials and you've got MDocs, so mobile documents basically. And one of our partners, Anonymy, discovered recently that in the, I think, specification for mobile driving licenses, there was like a phone home. So if I shared my driving license to you, there would be a check from you back to the issuer. So that, I guess in the US, the DMV, for was it be the DVLA. So you would go back and check and be like, is this driving license valid? And what that would mean is whoever issued it would know exactly where I was using it. Again, this kind of comes back to exactly the problem that everyone's flagging now, which is like no one wants their data with these organisations, and they also don't really want anyone knowing where they're using it. And so there's been this kind of big backlash of like, they've called it the No Phone Home initiative, but the whole purpose is you shouldn't know where someone's using their ID. Like, you should be able to use it wherever they want, like in a corner shop, in a club, like online, whatever. Like, but whoever issued that ID should not know where they're using it. So all of this technology, basically, it exists, it's out there, it's in the process of being rolled out, but there's a disconnect between like when this legislation's come in and when that stuff is actually live, and obviously you've still got to get people to adopt it. So I think there's a journey there. I think looking at it from understanding the tech, I'm hopeful that somewhere there's like a joined up approach to this, and they'll be like, hey, we've now got this solution, it allows you to do this, it's privacy preserving, and the hope is that it is. But there's just been a bit of a disconnect between like when one thing went in, when another thing was ready. Again, there's a lot of like ifs and buts and hope in there that's hanging it all together. But yeah, in theory, there's a route to doing this properly that it allows for protection of children whilst minimising friction and keeping everyone private at the same time.
So, I mean, I guess like my first question would be kind of linked to the no phone home thing you mentioned. To be clear, like if I had, say, this app or this document,
yep,
there's not a list somewhere of every single thing I've ever checked it against.
No, exactly. And that was one of the things that they found with this the MDL, the MDocs kind of implementation, like that was never. It was never what it was intended to be. It was just to be able to check, is the driving licence, has it been revoked or not? That was really what that was going for. But the problem was it enabled this like surveillance if you wanted to. And so their kind of arguments like you shouldn't even allow this to be possible because it's just such a dangerous thing. There were these studies that looked at when all the kind of restrictions came in around COVID, and I think quite a few organisations were like, every time there's a restriction on freedom and liberty, there's always wording around it'll be backed out. It'll always be like, we'll get through this whatever the event is, and then it's going to be kind of reversed. And they were like, was something like, I can't quote the statistics, but it was like a substantial number of these like restrictions always remain. So they're like, just putting them in the first place is always dangerous. And I think the same argument is there for the surveillance thing. Is they're like, if you enable this, someone will probably use it, and they shouldn't. It just shouldn't be in there whatsoever. So the nice thing on the SSI decentralised ID side is there is no way of doing that. There's no way of someone like surveilling where you're using stuff. And thankfully there's organisations like Anonymy and others that are like on top of the specifications and the implementations to call out and be like, this isn't private and it isn't safe and no one should use it as a result.
But I suppose it requires, say, companies to almost agree to use this, right?
Yeah.
And one of the problems we have with the internet is like the global nature of it. I mean, like, you know, good luck getting a site hosted in Vietnam to agree to implement something for people in England, kind of thing, you know? I imagine, like, unless you literally got every country in the world to agree to it, it's still going to be quite...
It's going to be patchwork, like, for sure. But I think the nice thing about these solutions are, like, the whole... One of these kind of solutions we're talking about is around identity cards or driving licenses or passports. But the nice thing is that these solutions aren't like one-trick ponies. So the same solution or concept works for feasibly any other data. So it could be your gym membership or receipts or your insurance or like pretty much you name it. But also into a corporate world where it's like, okay, what are my permissions in terms of signing documents on behalf of my company? Like, you've got all that kind of different ability. So like, even if it's a bit patchwork on these kind of services in terms of like online like adult content, that same infrastructure is then useful for everything else as well. So it would be useful for moving between banks. So, or opening up a new account or moving stuff around, like it will also make that so much quicker and easier because you're not having to go through that kind of like scan a document, which we now know is pretty like risky. Take a selfie, which again you can defraud. You're kind of moving into like all of this data moving around digitally instead. So.
Is there a challenge in sort of trying to get people on board in terms of like explaining how this works? Because it's quite complex, right?
It is, yeah, definitely.
What's your kind of like, I'm going to explain, was it like explain like I'm 5 kind of?
Yeah, it's something I've always struggled with. But the closest I can get to is imagine all the privacy and the lack of surveillance that you have around paper documents. Imagine that just on your phone. It's an equivalent. Like there isn't a change to who sees that data in theory. Like it's only you and whoever you share it to. There isn't, like, if you share your driving license to someone, there's not like a record somewhere of where you showed it to. Certainly not on like the DVLA side. And it's basically the same model. So it's just digitizing that, and the privacy model is still the same. It's probably what I'd lean on.
Yeah. I mean, I guess like, kind of similar, like I think if the government was to like pitch this tomorrow, people would think it was mass surveillance.
Yeah. And I think that's where that is probably the most difficult part of this, is the like, here's how it works and here's some proof that no one else knows about it. And it will be interesting when all this solution kind of comes out, because it may, like you've seen it elsewhere where there are solutions from from industry that get better adoption because they're not vulnerable to the same like distrust of the state. And it really depends, like globally. I'm sure there's a study about this somewhere where like it was all about relationships between like individuals and the state versus individuals and companies, and who they trusted more. And depending on whether there was like close trust, it was whether you'd be willing to accept a solution from the government or whether you'd want one from like private enterprise. And I think that's going to be a fascinating example here, is like if you've got something that is government issued, they say it's privacy preserving, in theory they can prove that it is because it'll be audited to the point where it's like, okay, we can prove that no one else sees this, but you're still vulnerable to like just perception and headlines, even if the underlying truth is that it's very, very private. So it's going to be fascinating to see.
Out of curiosity, when they did that study, do you remember kind of where countries ranked in terms of trust the government or trust private enterprise more?
I, again, could be completely wrong, but I think it almost followed the Nordics kind of going south in terms of like Nordics being higher trust.
In government?
I think so. Down to probably less trustworthy like the further south you go maybe. But it's been a while since I've checked it, so like don't quote me on that at all.
Yeah, fair enough. Like in terms of a solution like this actually happening.
Yeah.
Like what's going on now and what sort of timescale?
So there was an announcement I think by the UK government at the start of this year, and from what I remember the target was like end of this year to at least have like a government wallet that you can store data to. So like if that timeline's being met, which who knows, like you could be looking at something that's like feasibly by the end of the year. Realistically you're probably more looking like sometime next year, realistically. Then you're looking at like the actual adoption of, okay, there's enough data in there to be usable elsewhere, and then having that cycle of like people adopting it and then start to like all that integration work. So at best you're probably looking like mid to late next year, and again it all depends, like you were saying, it all depends on that adoption. Like if people are really reticent to adopt it because they just don't trust the government, then it will just never get off the floor.
That's
yeah, exactly.
For context, because like I think a lot of the people who are subscribed to Scamurai, they're like Hong Kong and the US.
Yeah.
So how many millions of people have signed that petition to get rid of the Prime Minister so far? Like 3 million or something?
Oh god, yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. So is there we've got like, well, in theory we've got 2 main political parties, and then we've got the Labour Conservatives, Liberal Democrats, and then Reform.
Yeah.
I guess reform counts as like a major one now. I don't know. I've been out of the country too long.
It's hard to tell because they get all the coverage, but in terms of MPs, I think they're the same as the Greens.
Oh really? I thought they were more popular than that.
Well,
It goes to show, doesn't it?
Well, I think in raw votes, I think they are. It's like all down to our political system in terms of like how many votes equal what seats and all this kind of stuff. So I think they had, again, I could be wrong, but I think their like number of absolute votes was substantially higher, but I think the number of seats they get as a result, because they lost out across a lot of seats, were similar to the Greens. So it's swings and roundabouts.
So like in terms of how much cross-party support there would be, like in a scenario that like Labour is chucked out, is this something you could see, you know, the Conservatives or Lib Dems or Reform carrying on with?
Weirdly, I think Reform made hay about this in terms of like, oh, this is badly implemented, all this kind of stuff, but I don't know if there was an alternative proposed. So, and I'd imagine the Conservatives did the same thing of like, this is terrible, but I don't remember seeing anything in terms of like, here's an actual like replacement. So I don't know. I honestly don't know. I would assume, I mean, we're 4 years away from another general election, so I would assume by then there's going to be some consensus on like, right, here's where we're going to go. I think going back to maybe that broader point at the start, like there is that movement away from a entirely kind of free and open internet, more focused around like children. Like, I think I've seen less arguments for like needing identity on the internet for adults. I think it's very much more like we need to protect children at the bottom end. So I would hope like in 4 years' time, there's a lot more clarity on like, right, we know where that line should be. I guess a little bit like what I'm seeing with my friends with kids, like we've had now 10, 15 years, and everyone kind of it ramped up over time. So when obviously everything was free and open for a while, and then it started getting a bit wonky, and now everyone's kind of like adjusting and trying to come back the other way to be like, okay, we're going to start like, we're not going to have our kids on iPads at the age of 3. Like, we're going to go back towards like they need to play and they need to socialise and they need to run around and do stupid stuff. Obviously up to a certain age. So I think maybe in 4 years' time there'll be a bit more of consensus around like what does work, what should we be aiming for, and therefore what solution do we need to go and build for. So again, speculative. And I guess to answer your question originally, I had no idea about cross-party support, but my hope is in like 4 years there's a bit more of like an educated discussion about it, which is we want to be here, and therefore how do we go and enable like that to happen.
But awesome, thank you so much.
No, thanks for having me.
Brilliant. And I don't actually know what happens now. I think we just sit here awkwardly staring at the cameras until
yeah, I think we let the guy in, or we just
I
give him
think
a nudge.
someone was like lurking outside.
Oh my god, we are as well.